There's a political theme to the summer. It's that governments who may appear long in the tooth are falling short in the polls. We've been talking this morning about poll numbers nationally, but in Ontario, where the Ford government faces a growing controversy around opening protected land up for developers, the numbers for them aren't pretty either. Here to unpack the malaise is our Sunday Scrum. Nick Nanos is the founder and chief data scientist of Nanos Research. Paul Wells is a journalist and author, and Sabrina Nanji is a journalist covering Ontario politics for the Queen's Park Observer. Hi, everybody. Wonderful to see you on this Sunday. Thanks for getting up so bright and early. Nick, I'll start with you. Let's look federally. What, if you were to quantify and qualify what happened over the summer, how would you describe it?
Well, it's been a roller coaster, Vashi. You know, what we saw in the Nanos tracking was the Conservatives that get about a 9-point lead, and we've seen that lead start to erode over the last while, but still an advantage. And you know, for the Liberals, they've just been on the defensive. It's like nothing is going right, and everything is going nothing's going right for the Liberals. Everything's going right for the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre right now.
What, Paul, do you attribute to that?
I think there's a sense the Liberals are stuck, and that when they announce good things are going to happen, they often come back later and swallow themselves whole. Justin Trudeau started to win because he seemed like the bringer of fresh new ideas. And it's the other guy, I mean, a lot of people don't like everything that either of them is saying, but the novelty in the political scene right now is coming from Pierre Poilievre. What you're getting, as we heard from Sean Fraser today, is a lot of, well, we're working on it. Well, it's hard. Well, it's complex. And I think voters are getting frustrated with that message from the government.
Sabrina, I want to ask you about the situation in Ontario because it's a little bit different, but sort of analogous in some ways. But I just want to get your take also on if your impression is that Canadians are feeling that the Liberals nationally or federally rather are stuck, and if you feel like that is reflected in what we're seeing polling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's interesting that time and time again, what keeps coming up as most important to Canadians right now is housing and cost of living. And interestingly, housing is a provincial purview, but they are laying that at Trudeau's feet. And I think the other aspect of this is that it's also a comms issue. I mean, you know, Poilievre has these new ads. He's kind of gone through a rebranding, and he's been trying to anyway stick to economic issues. And I think that's sort of taking a page out of Ford's playbook and for its success in Ontario. I mean, obviously, we can debate that these days, I think, but certainly I think that it comes down to, you know, define yourself rather than you're having your opponents define you. And Pierre Poilievre has been able to do that before the Liberals have really put up an effective mode of attack right now.
It was striking to me last week, actually, that very fact, Nick. And I started asking as many Liberals as I could and Conservatives when I was covering the convention. Like, are you surprised a party that has so successfully in the past defined its opponents, being the predecessors of Pierre Poilievre, gave him like 2 months of runway to have this massive ad buy and do it himself?
Yeah, not only that, you know, Pierre Poilievre defined himself from the get-go. You know, the thing is, I would hazard to say that for a new party leader, that he's probably has more brand definition. You know, it's controversial, but more brand definition than most. So I think the Liberals were happy with how he defined himself, especially through the leadership process and his appeal and alignment with the truckers and his positions on vaccinations and stuff like that. But what we're seeing is a purposeful layering of the brand. And you know, this came out with the next round of ads, right, with his wife and the kids and stuff like that. And another layering of the brand this past weekend at the policy conference where he was populist. I think the one thing that my key takeaway is populism has fully landed in Canada, right? He didn't talk about minority rights. He talked about majority opinion on a lot of these things, and you know, I think as a result, we're going to be seeing a showdown between one party that is focused on protecting minorities and minority rights and equality, and another party that does not have that as a priority.
Well, let me ask you, Paul, about that, because if there is a controversy coming out of the Tory convention, it's that they voted in favor on the policy, like in the policy debate, for a motion that will ban, or a policy that will ban gender-affirming medical procedures for minors. Lots of headlines that came out of that. We know things like that, debates over minority rights, LGBTQ rights in the past has tripped up other conservative leaders. What is your anticipation on this front? Is it a vulnerability for them?
Poilievre has 2 layers of protection against that. First of all, there's the opinion of most parents. Every poll I've seen shows that most parents, when the question is, you know, what if your kid were to go down this path, a lot of parents say, maybe at some point in life, but not early on. And so sort of elite opinion and general opinion diverge on this. The second layer of defense is his very strong assertion before the convention that he's not bound by any of this stuff, which is a little surprising given the history of the Reform Party where he comes from, which was supposed to be a party where the base speaks to the leader. What he said is base can speak to the leader all they want, I'll pick the policy. And so I don't think it's necessarily fatal or even necessarily harmful for him in the long run.
Sabrina, what's your take on that? And I certainly do take the point that when framed around the issue of parental rights, Paul's right, the polling is obvious that the majority of Canadians are sympathetic to that perspective. But there's also the people who are affected by these kinds of policies. Obviously, this party is in government, but some of the provinces that have pursued it, there are people who are affected by it who say that that framing is kind of false, right? That there's no evidence to support that this is happening in mass waves, and that parents, as such, the genesis of it is evidentiary based. That it's about sort of a culture war issue that we've seen permeate south of the border.
Yeah, I think Paul sort of hit the nail on the head here. I mean, he's not bound by any of this. This is something that Tory leaders have had to sort of bat down when they talk about, Big Tent and having their social conservative factions in there. But I think that, to Paul's point, he's right that the public polling on this has gone a certain way. I mean, we just saw Doug Ford speaking at Ford Fest in Kitchener over the weekend. And when he talked about, giving parents, informing parents of any, gender identity change or pronoun change that they want in schools, they should know. And he got these resounding cheers. So even anecdotally, I think the Conservatives have, know what they're doing on this file. But at the end of the day, I think what this is ammo for the Liberals to attack the Conservatives on this line and say, look, they're bringing dog whistle politics to Canada. We don't want this. So I think, if anything, this is just ammo for the federal Liberals.
And I saw that, as I say, over the summer, they didn't do a lot of defining of Pierre Poilievre. In the past 2 days, more social media from various ministers and Liberals than I've seen in the last 2 months about this kind of thing. Nick.
Absolutely. It's been a full-on attack from the Liberals as they try to derail what Pierre Poilievre wants as an infomercial for the Conservatives. But, as context to all of these policies, the reality is, from a polling and electoral perspective, the Conservatives only need 36% support to win the election. So they don't even need a majority of Canadians to agree with all the policies and the things that Pierre Poilievre talked about. And I think he's taken a page out of Stephen Harper's playbook. Stephen Harper never wanted to be the most popular leader. He was never a huggable guy, right? And I think his objective was to deliver the base and to get to that 36%. That worked for him for a number of elections.
Paul, last word to you. I think if we were having this conversation and an election were happening in a month, we could probably predict with greater success how things would go. But there might not be an election for 2 years. How do you think that impacts the trajectory of things right now?
Anything could happen, he said wisely. I mean,
or he hopes.
We have seen polling numbers reverse themselves over time. What I hear is that Justin Trudeau has kind of fallen in love with the narrative that he gets up off the mat in the last round. He literally, in the sense that he remembers that boxing match he had so many years ago. And he remembers in 2019 and especially in 2021, he was in real trouble and then he pulled it out at the end. The problem for Liberals is you're putting all of your chips on the ability of Justin Trudeau to turn things around a fourth time. And meanwhile, we're getting interviews like we've seen today where ministers on serious files are not busting out with answers. And so, anything could happen, including continuity in these numbers.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I really appreciate the discussion, your analysis this morning. Sabrina Nanji, Paul Wells, and Nick Nanos.